So welcome to Plymouth, and to those of you who are online, welcome to Groundwell. It's really brilliant to have your company this morning. I'm Jane Sillis, I'm Director of Engage, and this morning's session is learning all about the brilliant work that's happened through the MaxLiteracy programme. At Engage, we've been honoured to be working with the Max Reinhardt Charitable Trust for more than a decade, and we'll be hearing from the chair of the trust in a moment, Veronica Reinhardt, about the partnership we've managed to develop with their support, but also with the brilliant support of NAWE, and we'll be hearing from Claire from NAWE also in a moment. We're really grateful for the ongoing support of the charity for the work we've been able to develop with visual arts organisations around creative writing. It's been a really exciting and fulfilling partnership. I'm just going to do some brief housekeeping for those of you in the room and for everyone joining us online this morning. So this session's being recorded, so if you could have your phones on silent, that would be brilliant. If you need to take a phone call, if you could, and you're in this room, if you could just move out to the cafe, that'd be fantastic. For those of you joining us online, if you could stay muted, that would be fab. Up to you if you have your cameras on or off. If you have questions, please pop those in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat, and then we'll be able to address those when we come to the Q&A. So I'm just going to hand over to Veronica Reinhardt.
Thanks, Jane. As Jane said, I'm Veronica Reinhardt, and I'm the chair of the Max Reinhardt Charitable Trust that funds both MaxLiteracy and the Alexander Reinhardt Memorial Award, both of which we run with the support of Engage. And I just thought it'd be nice just to talk a little bit about how it all came about, because my father was a publisher. His name was Max Reinhardt, and he ran a company called The Bodley Head. And he published a lot of amazing writers, Charlie Chaplin, Graham Greene, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, just to name a few of the sort of stellar ones. And the money that to start MaxLiteracy originally came from selling some of those correspondence between the publisher, my father, and his authors, all of which was about a very deep friendship, about partnership, about working together to create the book and to create literature. So it felt very fitting that though the sale of those letters was the initial seed funding to start MaxLiteracy, which is all about partnership, about working together, and the legacy of MaxLiteracy is very much founded in creating partnerships that last well beyond the duration of a project. So, I mean, the original idea for MaxLiteracy came because I was working up at a North London primary school, and I was chatting to the head there, and he was telling me about this project that he'd just run with the government art collection. And I'd just been to visit the government art collection with Jane, actually, and they'd also talked about this little project, and they were absolutely thrilled with it. And it hadn't cost anything. All that had happened was they'd met at a drinks party, the education lady from Government Art Collection and the head of this primary school, and decided to do a little project together. And the teacher was ecstatic because the difference it made to his kids to be able to take them out of school, take them to this collection, for them to be free to write and to have a little exhibition there was fantastic. And he was really keen to keep going with it for the next year. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful? I mean, that happened by serendipity. Surely we can do something where we create opportunities where we can embed this and help other people form these partnerships. And it was around that time that I sold the first tranche of letters from my father to seed that original idea. And we've been fantastically supported by Engage in doing that, and by NAWE and Anne Caldwell at NAWE. So I'm really excited that how the projects have continued to go forward. But really, I just wanted to stress how important the key thing is. We bring writers, schools, and galleries together. After that, it's up to them. But it's the magic that they create by working together that creates something far greater than they can do individually. And if those partnerships can be truly embedded, and if senior leadership in schools see what those partnerships achieve, then the hope is that the schools then continue to want to fund those projects, give them the energy and the space that is so difficult to find in school curriculums at the moment. I'm delighted now really to be able to hand over to Claire Collinson, who has supported us, both because she was one of the first writers to work with us on the first iteration of MaxLiteracy at a project in North Cambridge. Just going to talk a little bit about it because it embodies so much of what MaxLiteracy is about. This area of North Cambridge was an area that Kettle's Yard, the gallery, felt they weren't reaching. There were a lot of children there with English as a second language, a lot of families who didn't speak English, who were not engaging with the gallery. So they decided to reach out to a local school. There was an amazing teacher there. Claire came in and they worked on a project together in 2014. When the kids were in year 3. Many of those kids really didn't even have the most basic literacy skills. The project was a huge success. I remember at the time feeling slightly concerned because Kettle's Yard was closing, but I shouldn't have worried because the gallery was really keen to pursue the relationship, and the school afterwards, seeing the benefit that those children had got, was really keen that they do so. And so when the gallery reopened about 3 years later, the children from that school were the ones that were asked to come and deliver a poem with Claire's help to open the gallery. The teacher then went on the board of the gallery as a trustee, and the head of the school said, "It has been the most amazing experience we've ever had. It has now become really an extension of our curriculum, is providing stuff that we as a school cannot do. And as a community, we are all much more engaged in the arts, and a lot of families that previously had not really engaged with the arts in any way were engaging not only with Kettle's Yard, but with the local carnival. And the children really felt ownership of that gallery in a way that they hadn't before. What an amazing success story. So on that note, I will hand over to Claire, who maybe will talk to you a little bit more. She's also been working with us on this iteration of MaxLiteracy as a mentor and as a support for the current projects. But I do ask you to go and have a look at our website, because we did make a little film about Kettle's Yard and how that legacy has worked over time. It really is an inspiration. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to hearing how everyone has got on, and I'll now hand you over to Claire.
Thanks so much, Veronica. You've also covered quite a few things that I was going to cover, so tick. Hi, I'm coming here today with a couple of hats on. As Veronica mentioned, I was the first recipient of the MaxLiteracy opportunity, and it was life-changing. I'm originally a visual artist. I'm a writer, and I am an educator, and I design resources, mainly as a result of taking part in the Kettle's Yard MaxLiteracy. But I'm also this year championing writers for NAWE as part of the MaxLiteracy project. And so it really has been the gift that keeps on giving. So my role this year has been to provide support for the writers and to give advice on the resources, which we'll hear more about. I can't wait soon. I just wanted to, I don't know if, does that bring on slides? Oh yeah. So I made a couple of slides. The MaxLiteracy website has all the resources. So one of the things I really wanted to make sure I bigged up in this opportunity is that we already have an extraordinary bank of resources that are there and freely available and can be reached through the MaxLiteracy site. And through there you will find, there you go, innovative resources, which include Making Conversations, which is the one that I produced. NAWE as an organization is National Association of Writers in Education, and they have been able to kind of broker relationships between artists and arts organizations with writers. So if you ever need a writer for a project, whatever kind, it has an index of writers available, and it's also provides PL insurance, and has a conference in November. So I just wanted to make anyone who doesn't know about NAWE aware of what it does apart from the MaxLit project. So back in 2014, 2015, I had the privilege of working at Kettle's, and I just wanted to quickly go through some of the things that I discovered when I was creating this resource, as thinking about what writers can provide for arts projects. So I think writers are problem solvers, and I think that constraints can be really galvanizing. So the first stage that we had with this project was really in-depth conversations with all the stakeholders, a lot of talking and looking at logistics. And we were really fortunate that there was fantastic goodwill and excellent communications between us. And that at the very start made everything so much easier. I wanted to support children and teachers with the difficult job of ticking boxes within the national curriculum's requirements. And that's, I think, double-edged, because we don't want resources that are just box-ticking national curriculum. So that's where the problem-solving and constraints being galvanizing comes in, really. That, you know, how do I find really poetic ways of doing things that will support the teachers in what they have to do anyway, without giving them extra work, and provide the experience that celebrates what is unique about the art space and the art of Kettle's, So looking at the vernacular of Kettle's, what is unique about it? There are no captions on any of the artworks. It's a home. It was a home as well as a collection. They loaned their artworks. Jim Eade used to loan people. Students coming in from the university would borrow pieces of art and sometimes even forget to bring them back for lengths of time. And he built up that collection. He and Helen Eade built up that collection through swaps and loans. So that was an aspect of it that I wanted to celebrate. And they have a fantastic maritime collection, including a lot of Alfred Wallace. So thinking of those aspects and then looking at what the teachers had to cover, as you will see if you go to the resources and the case studies afterwards, I talk about how one of the things that was on the national curriculum's tick box list was messages in bottles, which is lovely, but incredibly difficult concept if the child from North Cambridge has never seen the sea, which was the case. So so it's a matter of breaking things down. So looking at things that they had to cover, I picked up on messages in bottles and letter writing and general articulacy. So just going through, this is the resource that we came up with, and I'll go through some of the pictures. One of the first things was just making connections. I think artists, writers of any level, if I give them 3 words at random, we can make up stories. So just finding 3 objects in the collection and joining them together and making stories between them gives children such a sense of agency and an ownership that they are the ones curating the space, really. So that was the first place we started, creating these pebbles, and pebbles are a real feature of Kettle's, so in the vernacular of Kettle's. And then the next one, dealing with this messages in bottles, was about filling the imagination tank. Again, with writers, it's sometimes people think they can't write unless they have an imagination. But if you've not experienced something, it's very hard to imagine. So using the paintings as a starting point to have a lot of provoking questions that will really fill the imagination tank, which was the way we used it, so that then using an origami boat, the tiny pieces of information could be put. And I find if you've only got a very small amount of space, so you've got the place to put the name of the boat, the place to put where its destination was, where it was coming from, what the cargo was, and you've only got a very tiny amount of space to write those things, it's less intimidating than a great big blank piece of paper. So this is where we started, and then they went on their adventure and got shipwrecked. And so then they had loads of material when it came to writing messages in bottles. So that was where we approached that, using the techniques through the gallery, but in the vernacular of Quatorze. And finally, who doesn't play that game when they go to a gallery of thinking about what you'd love to steal, take home, put on the wall? So we played that with the Quatorze collection, but in a sense of letter writing. So if I go back there, the children wrote letters to dear Helen and Jim of what they would like to borrow from the collection. And in return, they offered something that they would like to donate to the collection. And we had a fantastic celebration event where they brought in objects that they treasured and displayed them in Quatorze as an exchange for the ones that they would like to borrow. So that is a kind of rundown of the things that came through. As far as legacy, please take a look at the case studies because it goes into it in depth. But I think the fact that I'm continuing and working in a different capacity for me is a fantastic legacy. The poem that we created for the cutting of the ribbon is now in situ in the gallery in Quatorze. If you're ever passing, you will see the poem that the children wrote. And they valued that as one of their top experiences moving on into secondary school from primary. So it was a really extraordinary experience. I think as it's moved on, we've seen literacy develop into articulacy, agency, oracy. And I think a lot of the projects today are going to be showing us where these different directions of how different ways of supporting literacy using art can take us. But I think I'm in time. And so I'll stop there. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Claire. I'm Hannah and I'm the creative producer for Engage, and I've been supporting the whole team with the Max Literacy Awards this year, and also was lucky enough in a previous role to be a Max Literacy awardee. Rhonda Golden Pride, who's our Max Literacy coordinator, is off sick today, which is absolutely devastated not to be here, but you'll see me doing a bit of comparing where she would have done it. So we're now going to watch a film which has been pre-recorded from one of our awardees this year, which was Take Apart, based here in Plymouth. So hopefully that's going to come up shortly, and we'll bring the next group on after that.
Hi, I'm Jem Smith, Head of Engagement Programme at Take Apart. Take Apart is an arts organisation that makes social change in communities by the community through arts, heritage and environment. And I'm here today to talk to you about our Max Literacy project and the learning from that piece of work. For our work as part of the Max Literacy Awards, we worked with Crazy Glue, our bespoke after-school arts club model, which connects with families, offering them the chance to make together, build skills, confidence and connect. Crazy Glue has been delivered by Take Apart since 2009. So in 2023, the National Marine Park in Plymouth approached Take Apart to lead on a project creating a digital outcome that would test ways of connecting communities with the marine park and oceans. Following 6 co-created sessions, an illustrated story, Colin the Cormorant, was created by Simon James, award-winning children's author and illustrator, Prince Rock Primary School's Crazy Glue Family Art Group, and Take Apart.
Colin the Cormorant.
By the Crazy Glue Club.
One day, Colin the Cormorant was waddling along Teats Hill Beach. He was hungry.
Something shiny caught Colin's eye. It smelled good.
Perhaps there is food inside, thought Colin.
But Colin's bait got stuck. He tried to pull off the can. He tried to bash it on the rocks.
But it all look.
Crab tried to help, but the can wouldn't move.
The snails couldn't help. You're in a right pickle, they said. Fish popped up. He couldn't help either. You'll have to get a human to help, he said.
Colin waddled up the tiny beach.
Colin waited by the front door of a block of flats.
But no one seemed to notice him until, that is, Billy came out of the entrance.
Look, Gran, said Billy. That bird needs help. Granny pulled the can. It wasn't easy.
Colin tried to help. Pull harder, Granny, said Billy. Suddenly the can broke away. Colin was free. Well done, Granny, said Billy.
They watched the cormorant fly across the beach and land on his rock.
Billy turned to Granny. This beach is a terrible mess, he said. Can't we help? It's a big job, said Granny. At least we are helping, said Billy. That's true, said Granny.
It wasn't long before all Granny's neighbours started helping too.
Colin the Cormorant watched from his rock as the beach was cleared.
It wasn't until late in the evening that the work was finished. All the neighbours celebrated together.
That night, Colin the Cormorant stretched out his wings in the moonlight, and all was still on Teats Hill Beach.
The end.
This project was a catalyst for starting to understand how and why arts approaches could support families to engage with creative writing, storytelling and oracy, and raised questions for us as an organisation. Why did this work so well? Could we replicate this work? Is this a new approach within the Crazy Glue model? Is this unique to Prince Rock and the families, the school and the context that we were in? Does it always need to be Simon? Is this a moment, a set of perfect circumstances, or are we developing a new model? As we had these existing relationships and ways of working, the MaxLiteracy programme offered us the opportunity to undertake action research and address some of these questions, understanding what, how and why this model is successful by building on the growing appetite for writing with Crazy Glue, who are traditionally a more visually arts focused group, the development of different approaches to creative work with families for Take Apart, using writing as a newer tool for creativity within this context, and a new way of working entirely for Simon James, as an author tending to usually work on his own stories and books and pictures. So, for our MaxLiteracy project, we kept the project structure for the Prince Rock group largely the same as Colin the Cormorant, with an outdoor space, this time at their local park, inspiring the writing, drawing and storytelling, and a set of sessions enabling a co-created story to be developed between Simon and the group. We did this to as much as possible keep the model the same and to test its parameters. And then, to further test and understand what and how from this work might be transferable, we replicated the structure of the project with another family art group at Highview School based in Efford. So we had the same approaches, but with a different family and a different community context. We also took the opportunity offered by MaxLiteracy to engage an emergent writer and work with Laura Horton, a playwright for the Highview School group, bringing into the mix a different creative and a different genre of writing to see what impact that might have on how the model functions. These families took their local green space of Efford Valley and worked with Laura to develop monologues of characters that could be living in that green space. The process was very different, with activity more closely linked to drama, improvisation and storytelling to support shaping the writing. So in terms of planning and running the two groups alongside each other, we actually staggered the start date of the High View group so that we could take our learning and process from the Prince Rock sessions into the High View group. Simon and Laura also had time as our two creatives to talk together and learn from each other. And the creative team at Take Apart were also part of that process, talking to the writers to understand what and how was happening within the model. So what did we learn from the sessions and the project? Art was essential. I mean, it always is within our work, but specifically when making this programme within every session, although writing was a focus, art was always offered. I think there was a nervousness from me as a producer to fully commit to only writing in the sessions, as this wasn't why the group primarily comes together, although writing is a creative thing. So ensuring that the opportunity was built into sessions to draw alongside our writing was really important, particularly in the High View group, where we moved from writing and illustration work towards playwriting. Drawing and sketching alongside the writing tasks was important in breaking up the exercises and offering people another way into the sessions and the project, and keeping people who were less wary of writing on side. Trust and a safe space are key to the work. The things that we all know are really important for socially engaged work, really important in these spaces. Valuing voice, allowing everyone the space to share their ideas if they want to, listening, taking time and creating together are so incredibly important within this work, especially given that we were challenging families to do something new in writing, something that they might not be comfortable with at all. There's now a new question for me leading this work around whether or not we could do this again with a radically different art form and artist from what the group are used to month on month, for example, dance or drama. Is the nub of why this works tied up in the fact that the crazy glue model enables trust and a safe space to push and explore from? And then is this learning or validation of the crazy glue model more widely? Long-term and embedded relationships build trust. And by leaning into our organisational values and using the MaxLiteracy Award to enhance the existing relationships and partnerships that we have, we were able to meet people where they were at and understand where the energy was for this work. Key to the project working was the fact that people understood the process, felt confident and felt able to be involved. The MaxLiteracy project enabled us to build on those relationships and momentum and elevate the opportunity for everyone. In this work at Take Apart, we were able to build on the structures of the project and build our confidence to better understand how using art to enable creative writing does and doesn't work, and what the successful approaches are to inform a model. The writers also learned about their practice and collaborating with people and working in new ways. And I just wanted to read this quote from Simon. "When I look up and see the whole group working, children and parents together, these are my favourite moments. For me, the culmination of all our efforts are for these moments where there is a sense of unity, purpose, and focus of minds when working together towards a jointly held creative goal." As with a lot of our work, it's process-driven rather than outcome-driven. That said, for both family groups working on this project, an outcome gave them a thing to aim for and promoted a sense of pride in the work. Knowing there would be something created at the end, in this case, another new co-created illustrated story for Prince Rock, and a set of character monologues for High View, was a great driver and focus. Keeping those outcomes in mind, we still made sure that everyone enjoyed each session and exercise along the way, and that people felt they were building skills and confidence through the process too. Our MaxLiteracy resource shares further insight into our process, giving others wanting to do this type of work our take on conditions for the work, things to consider, project start points and tasks to get families writing and drawing. So if you'd like to learn more, please do check that out. Thank you for listening.
So thank you remotely to Jem Smith for sharing that really wonderful and thorough overview of their project for MaxLiteracy. Jem is actually here for the gathering. She's just not here this morning. So if you want to catch her later on and chat to her about the project in more detail, she's got pink hair, so you can't really miss her. So I'm now going to hand over to the Nottingham Contemporary team. We've got Lisa with us in person and Peter and Sandra online. So do you want to come up, Lisa? Thank you very much.
Right, hello. And I'm just going to stop my timer because make sure I'm on time. So thank you to everyone in the room for joining us, and thank you to everyone online. 20 minutes really isn't enough to share what we've done. We found out that it just keeps growing and it just keeps connecting with everything that we do. But we've got 20 minutes, so we're going to try and explain it all to you then. So I'm Lisa, I'm the Learning Programme Manager at Nottingham Contemporary. We have Peter, who's joined us online, who is our associate writer and the creative writer for the MaxLiteracy project. There's Peter. And we're also going to be joined by Sandra, and Sandra is our schools programmer at Nottingham Contemporary, but she's also a primary school teacher as well, with a specialism in EAL. And the person who can't join us is Jonathan Cutting, who is the teacher at Nest who we worked with. And I just want to give a little bit of a background about Nest. It's a full-time educational provision based in Nottingham. It is for asylum seekers and refugees aged 15 to 19 with no previous formal education and no literacy in their first language, possibly. So an overview of our MaxLiteracy project. We felt that this would help us build on existing relationships and long-standing commitment to work with refugee communities and support services, as well as our work towards supporting learning and literacy and understanding the role that creative approaches and arts venue can play. Our project is titled A Word to Our City. This is where I bring up slide number 1. Thank you. And our inquiries are, how do we welcome and support young people to make a new home in our towns and cities? How do we develop so that young people feel they belong in our arts and cultural spaces? And for asylum seekers and refugee communities to have a sense of belonging to the city, Nottingham, and how our project can contribute to an engagement framework across the city's cultural venues. The project draws on the findings of the Art of Belonging project, which was an academic research project involving the University of Nottingham and Lund University, Sweden, and New Art Exchange Nottingham. And that was concluded around about 2 years ago. And that looked at the social integration of young refugees through arts and cultural placemaking, identifying signature pedagogies of artists working with new arrivals. So our project drew on the findings of that to take it forward. Next slide. Yeah, there we go. So the structure of the project. We had 4 cohorts of 15 to 20 Nest pupils. Each cohort had 6 sessions in their programmes, and Peter and Jonathan planned and delivered the series of workshops together, with Peter delivering 2 of those for each cohort, and Jonathan delivered between those, so the partnership between them was really strong. Each cohort visited a different cultural venue, and our partners on this project were Nottingham Castle, New Art Exchange, Lakeside Arts, and ourselves, Nottingham Contemporary. And we explored the exhibitions and the venues through creative writing with a multimodal approach. So there were many, many layers to the project, and it just keeps layering as we go along about how we connect with people, how we connect with services. But we had a lot of preparation to do before the project actually started. We have to consider the ongoing care, the considerations and responsibility we have to these pupils and to the staff and our staff. So Peter had previous experience of working with Nest and with asylum seekers and refugees. We had already worked with Nest, so we were building that partnership and building that trust. We've all had trauma-informed training, so we can put that into practice. And also anyone that was involved, such as the photographer, the designer, have had experience themselves of asylum or refugee status. And then on top of that, you've got all the sensitivities around the pupils, the language, the way that we communicate, trying to also ensure that the pupils have agency and that we hear their voice. So I'm going to pass over to Peter, who's going to talk through some slides. He'll talk through the principles on which the project was built. And then he's going to ask you to contribute to a short, relaxing, creative exercise. So those of you sitting on chairs, you will need to make your way to a table. And those of you that are joining us online, I think you've also been informed that you require some paper. And then we're going to pass over to Sandra, who's going to discuss the citywide Art of Belonging pledge and how we've embedded elements of the project into Nottingham Contemporary and the resource that we're producing. So I'm going to hand over to Peter now.
Thank you very much. Skills. So, for example, after one group of students looked at portraits in frames at Nottingham Castle, we used frames to draw in, as you can see here. We used frames to structure narrative writing, which would be the next phase from this image. And we even used frames to format an accessible evaluation tool. So here on this slide, you can see how the student from the previous slide has developed their work back in school after the gallery visit, just working with a teacher. Now, another principle was that we wanted to explore big concepts inspired by artworks in order to develop what you might call utilitarian or very practical language, which the students need to survive. And so in the previous slide, you saw the student responding to the historical site of Nottingham Castle, exploring the ideas of past, present, and future. And in this slide, responding to Saad Qureshi's exhibition Conversations Before the End of Time at Lakeside Arts. The students made their own clay sculptures, and as they worked with the clay, and afterwards they shared their thoughts, they talked, they wrote about home culture that's left behind, about being in limbo, about having aspirations, and about looking to the future, all of which was stimulated by the big concept behind Saad Qureshi's work. So if we go to the next slide, thank you. Everything we did was scaffolded and modeled all the way through, and our practice was informed on a daily basis by the students' responses and their reactions to the work. So for example, Jonathan, the teacher, had discussions halfway through the project with the school counsellor about what is the safest way to enable someone to tell their story. It might be a fictional story they want to tell. They may want to tell you their own personal story, but whichever it is, we need to be safe doing that. And we needed to be aware of personal or cultural sensitivities when engaging with the artworks. And finally, of our principles, we use diverse imagery and intercultural references to engage the group as a whole and help to make positive connections with the host culture here in Nottingham. So that's a brief run through of the principles. And so what we thought we'd do now is offer you the opportunity to do a very quick and hopefully relaxing drawing and writing exercise. I'm sure I'll get cut off if I run on for too long, so I should just plow on. We're going to create a story poem in 7 minutes through drawing and writing. This was one of the warm-up exercises we used in the project. I think it was before we did a graphic novel page, but also we used it just to change the mood in the room, warm people up, or give focus to the learning in the space. So we're going to work fast. Whilst Lisa is distributing hard copies of the drawing sheet to everyone in the room, if we could have the next slide, please. So if you're online, could you grab a sheet of paper and put it landscape, pencil and or pen, and can you try and replicate this page as best you can? It doesn't have to be exact. There's 3 roughly similarly sized rectangles at the top and 3 underneath. Freehand, doesn't have to be perfect. 15 seconds just to do that. Okay, obviously I'm assessing what people are doing in the room there in Plymouth. Hello, Plymouth, and also what might be happening online. So forgive me if I go behind or just adapt as you need to. Okay, so the top left-hand box. For 10 seconds, can you please scribble in any way you like inside that box? Don't think about it. Just let the pencil do the work. Off you go, 10 seconds. Okay, thank you. Now, can you do the same? I'm going to ask you in a moment to scribble in the top middle box, but can you try and scribble in a different way from the first box? So if it was curvy and organic in the first box, can you make it jagged or staccato in the second box, or vice versa? Okay, 10 seconds, just another scribble, off you go. Great. And then just have a look at that second image and just ask yourself, does it suggest another image? Does it suggest a feeling or an action? What's coming to you from the picture? Okay, and now can you put the tip of your pen or pencil inside the third box, the top right box, and close your eyes? And I'm going to ask you to scribble for 10 seconds without your eyes open. Off you go. Whatever you like. Great, thank you very much. Now, you open your eyes, look at the 3 images you've created. If we can go to the next slide. So what I've done, as you can see, is I have kind of inferred or interpreted the top slide and redrawn it underneath in a slightly more figurative or representational way. So on the bottom, there's the curvy lines have become 2 people in a relationship. The middle one's become a kind of cityscape, and the one on the right was sort of like someone, I don't know if they're going up a mountain or down a mountain, it doesn't matter. Okay, so I've just redrawn it very, very quickly. I'm going to give you 30 seconds, please, just to do that with your pictures, to reinterpret the pictures and allow something to emerge, which might suggest character or action or place or emotion. Off you go. Okay, thank you. If we go to the next slide, please. By the way, if you've been completely turned off this exercise and just holding your hands up in despair, don't worry, just think about the process, okay? There's no obligation to finish this off. Right, so now, you can see I've written some words which were suggested to me as I was drawing or just after. Can you write some words in or around your 3 bottom pictures? Just there might be dialogue, there might be feelings, there might be action, there might be description. It really doesn't matter. Off the top of your head, 20 seconds just to write some words or phrases down. Try not to censor yourself if you can. Okay, so just to share that instead of working with refugees in a room, reading their every expression, the temperature of the room, I have no idea what's going on in Plymouth. I have no idea what's going on in your homes and offices. So this is quite a strange experience. But if we move to the next slide, please, you can see that I have simply grabbed some of the words or phrases that I've already written down, and I've just plonked them down in order to create a 3-line poem. I hadn't thought about it too much. I've grabbed the first phrase, I've grabbed the second phrase, and I've created a poem which reads, I climb the mountain, my heart burns for home, hold me, I will return. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do. If you look at the phrase above, blowing in the wind, that could start the poem, it could end the poem, it really doesn't matter. As you grab these words and phrases, other thoughts will come into your mind. Go with them and see if you can write in 30 seconds a 3-line poem. Okay, so thank you very much for engaging with that, having a go in whatever way you did. If you want to put your 3-line poem in the chat, you've always got a chance to do so. But now we need to move on, and I'm going to hand over to Sandra, who's going to talk about how our work alongside the NEST students is going to be reflected in the published resources.
Hi everyone. So I'm just going to talk through using this slide as a visual that we shared with our designer. So this will be turned into the final resource by the designer, but it was just sort of how Lisa mentioned about layering and exploring different strands of the project while still providing insights and ideas through activities. So the online resource is aimed at educators, artists, cultural venues, working with refugee communities, or indeed those seeking to. So the designer, as Lisa mentioned, we're working with has lived experience of being a refugee, and we felt this was really important to have somebody representative of the community. We'd seen her work in another exhibition called Voice Notes at one of our partner venues, New Art Exchange, and just loved how the visuals and how she presented the work, but also felt it was essential for working alongside her expertise to support the development of a resource like this and its layers. So this slide is the draft example of how we sort of visualize those threads and layers of the project. So for example, the top icon shows some of the prompts that were used in this automatic drawing activity, which was an activity that Peter used to sort of set that scene as students entered the room, and was repeated throughout the sessions as well as a way to invite students to just follow their pencil. So the top icon shows that prompt words were translated, such as home, belonging, city, to provide a point of connection. And as Peter mentioned, that immediate, I suppose, that invitation of using any language and that choice as well, and providing a level of comfort. So it was really, the next icon is the type of creative activity, so the automatic drawings. And then the next icon is about the care, which really underpinned every activity and was really that idea of collaboration between Peter and Nest and Jonathan and Nest, talking through each step of the activities, and how that, and thinking about the pupil voice and pupil experience. So in this activity, it was really important to have something that was open-ended, the opportunity to write in the home language or in English, or to just, you know, just feel comfortable to follow your pencil and draw whatever came to mind. There was also music playing, and it really sort of set that environment up. It was also the bottom icon is the idea of how that collaboration comes through different activities. So In this instance, it was drawing alongside pupils. So Jonathan and Peter sort of modelled the drawing, very low stakes modelling, the opening of the session. It was the changing of the setup of that existing educational space at Nest as well, and to just provide a slightly different feeling to the environment as well. So again, it was a lot of the time working with Jonathan and guided by Jonathan as how to develop that. So in terms of the resource, we envisage that there'll be this idea of linking through to different parts of the resource and of the document. So for example, if you were more interested in learning about the care aspect, you could click on that icon and it will take you to another part of the document that can give a little bit more insight to the pedagogy or the training that has informed it, or the process and research that has informed that, the sort of ideas behind the activities. So still being guided by Jonathan and working with him to develop the resource, Jonathan has, it's definitely a series of 6 sessions that people can use to develop creative writing in different ways. So these are 6 sessions that have been delivered across the year by Peter and Jonathan. And so there's an element of how to deliver the activities, what you will need, a practical aspect, what resources, how long it might take, just to really have that sort of toolkit layer. But then there's also one of the considerations that Jonathan highlighted to us from the beginning was that the change in nature of the community at Nest meant that some students would just access one session maybe. There might be students that access various sessions. So there's definitely activities that somebody can pick up and then use as a one-off activity, or an activity that could be reiterated and repeated in different ways. So the aim is really that people can choose those individual activities or deliver multiple sessions. And although the project was based across different cultural venues as part of the aim to connect young people to the city and provide the visual art stimulus through the exhibitions, the nature of the activities actually isn't venue specific, so they can be used anywhere. And we hope that it will provide a series of activities that can be used in different venues and different spaces. So working with Jonathan at Nest really meant that pupils had this familiar space to work at as well as the cultural venues. And on reflection, we've realised, and with Jonathan's reflections as well, how useful that's been for embedding it in the curriculum and giving it a little bit more time and space across the time of the project. So the fact that the project is layered means that we've been able to capture this moment in the partnership and offered a series of activities, but we don't see it as a finite, complete resource. So instead, one that can evolve. So we're going to have an appendice page with live links and have this live aspect so that it can be updated, so that it can be evolved and really used as signposting to training, other organisations, building that network, reinforcing the network, and providing links of lots of different work happening as part of the wider context. And then I don't know if we can go back to the slide with the poem, the yellow slide. Yeah. So just to follow on from that and to give that sort of a little bit more information about the wider context and in terms of legacy for A Word to Our City, this has happened at the same time as a real sort of formalised commitment of Nottingham City to create a cultural pledge. So through the city's Cultural Educational Partnership Challenge, for how arts and culture can play that vital role, just in fostering that understanding, the empathy, the inclusion, and embedding it across organisations. So again, it's using the resource and sharing that within our organisation, sharing the training that we've had, but also working alongside the partnership venues and other organisations across the city. Supporting the pledge also means embedding policies, formalising it, but really promoting the voices and contributions of the refugee community through different artistic and cultural programmes. And again, as I said, strengthening that network. So it's also worth considering extra funding opportunities that we've had through the project to capture this work. we've had extra funding from University of Nottingham for us to raise visibility, not just of the project, but also the voices and the work of Nest pupils across the city in the partner venues to really showcase them and their voices. And through the partnership with Nest as well, it's continuing to evolve that and work together in different ways and look ahead with that as well. We have 2 students from Nest taking part in our work experience week, which we deliver again with New Art Exchange and Nottingham Museums and Galleries. So that continuing partnership has always been essential as part of the legacy of the project. And then I'm going to hand back over to Peter, I believe.
Well, actually, no, because we need to move on. Thank you,
Oh.
Sandra. We're going to move on, and I'll hand back to Lisa because we've been very we've had generous time on this. So
Okay.
I've had a message to say, hand back to Lisa. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Sandra. And yeah, we have so much to say. I'm around for the next couple of days. So if you are attending the conference, please do ask me about this programme because I can talk for hours, as you've probably gathered, about it and all the details and the layering and the element of care every step of the way. I can also talk to you about actually what went wrong, challenges, and how we overcome them and how, yeah, we bit the bullet sometimes. So please do, yeah, get in touch and do ask me. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa, Peter and Sandra, and I really enjoyed the writing activities. It would be nice to have a moment after this we can share our poems with each other. Going to move swiftly on to hearing from Meadow Arts. So we have Emma and Juliet online, so hopefully they'll be coming up shortly to share their project as well. And I was going to say, you might have noticed across the different projects that we're sharing for MaxLiteracy that there's a really wide range of different types of organisations, and over the years MaxLiteracy has really evolved, and something that we've kind of made a kind of unique feature of this year's iteration is that there are quite a few organisations that are working outside of venues, and Meadow Arts is one of those, so hope you enjoy their presentation.
Take our apologies if we can't see anybody else than ourselves. So I will get started. Okay, so I am Emma Bowen. I'm the Learning and Engagement Manager at Meadow Arts, which is a contemporary visual arts organisation with no venue. And we work across Herefordshire, Shropshire and Worcestershire, putting contemporary art in unusual places, such as cathedrals, parks, floodplain meadows, and working in partnership with other cultural organisations. We have been working on this MaxLiteracy project with writer Juliet Morton, who joins me here, and the art and English departments from Pershore High School. So Meadow Arts have been working in Pershore since 2020. It's one of the main places that we have focused activity, and we've been commissioning artists to work with various different groups and organisations there, including the Youth Centre, Pershore Abbey, and the Avon Meadows floodplain at Meadows, which runs alongside the River Avon there. So this is a new partnership for us, working with Pershore High School and working with Key Stage 3 students on this project. The school contacted us after seeing an artwork we had installed in Pershore, made by artist duo Juno Projects, that they collaborated on with young people from the Youth Centre next to the Meadows, and they'd requested that we work with some of the young people at the school, as they'd recently undertaken a wellbeing survey where the students self-identified a need for creative activities and outlet for the anxieties they have, and around some of the mental health challenges that they were struggling with, particularly post-COVID. So another thing the school wanted to explore with us was what they called cultural capital. As the town of Pershore itself, it's quite a small town in rural Worcestershire with 12,000 people, and they have limited access to cultural activities and opportunities. So Meadow Arts had recently installed in the autumn of 2023 this artwork here that you can see by Hilary Jack in Pershore Abbey. So this artwork, called Deluge, is a large-scale artwork exploring climate change and flooding using text that Hilary Jack found and sourced from global news reports on floods, and also mythological narratives that she's presented here on parallel scrolling LED panels, as you might find on television news reports. So it seemed like a perfect opportunity for us to work with the young people in Pershore at the high school to explore how art and creative writing can be used to voice their thoughts and feelings around climate change and flooding as they live in a town that floods extensively. The River Avon floods most winters, and this year was particularly bad. So that was really the focus of this collaborative MaxLiteracy project for us, was to extend that partnership and develop a platform for these young people to kind of articulate their thoughts, anxieties and ideas. So yeah, very much contemporary art in a space that you wouldn't ordinarily expect to find it or come across something like this. So Juliet is going to talk to you about the process that she went through using her practice as the inspiration for how to go about supporting those young people to do that.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks. Yeah, so my own practice is as a poet and non-fiction writer. So it's very firmly rooted in kind of historic and contemporary rural landscapes. And that includes a very embodied approach to writing immersed in place. And sometimes that can be very literally immersed. I swim outdoors all year round. I often write in very extreme places. And I was kind of taking some of these practices to the young people at Pershore. So drawing on that, we invited students to come to the Abbey. You can see them there in that picture at the top left. And we invited them to kind of come on a field visit to gather thoughts, impressions, words, ideas, and to do that in a real sort of spirit of openness. So without any expectations at all, to just come and gather ideas and materials that might inspire their future writing. So just to see what arose in situ. And the intention was to kind of start with quite simple methods for eliciting word art and then build over the course of the project to create, I guess, more sophisticated pieces of writing in tandem with the artwork. So on that first visit, we spent lots of time exploring Deluge in its context of the Abbey and prompted the students to kind of really think about climate change and how it affected them. Emma's already mentioned the extensive flooding in Pershore, and the kind of projections currently are that by 2050 Pershore will likely be completely underwater. So students explored that artwork. Some of the responses were really positive. Some of the responses were kind of shrug shoulders, you know, it doesn't really sort of do much for me. You know, that is kind of, I guess, to be expected. And then we asked the students to go out into the Abbey. Some of them had never visited the Abbey before, so it was a real kind of adventure and exploration to look around the building. And some of them kind of drew on their own kind of cultural traditions, and they lit candles and they said prayers and so on. And we asked them to look for found words as they did that and went around exploring. And then we wrote those on different formats. So we wrote them on luggage tags, on cards, on paper, and that sort of started our exploration really into thinking about how context can really change the meaning of a particular artwork or words. So after lunch that day, we then went off to the floodplain meadows, which are on the banks of the River Avon. And it had been our plan to walk along the riverbanks, but when we got there, it was ironically flooded. And so our sort of plan was thwarted. But that did kind of give us an opportunity really to talk about how those kinds of unexpected events are going to become more and more common for people in Pershore and the times we're living through sort of more generally, and how that requires us to be flexible and to pivot and to take new directions. So instead of walking along the riverbank, we walked along the back of the meadows, picking our way through the mud and the puddles, and lots of young people on tiptoes in their white trainers that we'd asked them not to wear for that particular visit. But that allowed us to observe the environment up close, to come to a point on a jetty through a pond, sorry, and see a really long view back to the Abbey. So that was really nice to sort of be able to see the Abbey kind of in situ in the meadows. And we watched the birds move through the algae and listen to the wind whisk through the reeds. So that was an opportunity for some silent observation, some writing in silence, some walking, and to gather our field notes of sensory observations and found objects as well, like leaves, stones, feathers, that kind of thing. Okay. The students took those things back with them and put them in a scrapbook, which they maintained throughout of the project. And they gave us the materials to build on for subsequent workshops. So our first follow-up was just a very, very brief follow-up after that initial visit to the Abbey and the Meadows. And we just did a quick session at Creative Writing Club and played with this idea of the power of three. So from the Holy Trinity and also from Celtic belief systems around past, present and future. And young people sort of played with their found words to make very short poems in tercets or lines of three. Later on in December, we did a workshop inspired by the work of Mary Ruefle, who's a poet who makes erasure poems from found texts. So she blacks out or erases words to create new work, which is obviously a form that references flooding as the ink sort of spills over the page. You'll see there's an example there in the bottom left that some students did completely black out the text, but some of them just chose of their own accord to just write the word flood, 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 flood over and over and over on the top of Hilary Jack's text, which I think was really effective actually. And that kind of contrast between the seen and the unseen text, it kind of brings up thoughts of what's below the surface, what we know and what we don't know in these times of uncertainty. Sophie Herxheimer was another artist, sort of writer and artist work that we worked with. So she collages together quite random words to create prophetic tarot-like cards. So that was building on Hilary Jack's theme of prophecy and myth. We created our own cards using words that had been snipped out of the original Deluge text. And these kinds of activities really helped to build student confidence because they were working in quite a low stakes way with other people's texts to create their own new ones. We also worked with Gillian Waring's signs, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with. And that really excited the young people, this idea that they had total freedom to express how they felt about climate change and the ideas that we've been exploring. And some of the signs they came up with were about the themes, and some of them weren't. So some of them are more like reflections on themselves. And that just really offered a really lovely way for us to get to know one another better, build confidence about sharing work as a group, and then led us much deeper into exploring our feelings and responses to the challenges of climate change. So by the time we got to January, we were beginning to really take the stabilizers off and really get deeper into poetry and using text. So we worked with a contemporary poet's work, Boyega Odibanju's poem, A Story About Water, which draws on archetypes in a similar way to Hilary Jack and uses kind of little punctuation. It's very loosely structured and it's very, very conversational in style. That was really interesting, I think, for the young people, seeing about, sort of enabling them to think what might be possible in a poem, I guess. And after they've written these poems, thinking about all the bodies of water that surround us, from the water in the kettle and the toilet to the Atlantic Ocean, they wrote mythical tales where all of this water flows together into one. And then they transcribed those onto till rolls to mimic kind of Hilary Jack's form. And that helped them to think about how context might turn what is a story into news or fact. I'm a bit mindful of time, so I'm just going to talk about one of our final sessions in February, when we did our deepest dive into text as the art component of the project, which Emma will talk about again in a moment, had really begun to take wing by that point, and the students' written work had already really sort of started to fly. So in our final session, we explored the story of Capel Celyn, which was a village which was flooded deliberately in 1956 to create a reservoir to serve an expanding urban population. And so the young people used techniques of narrative poetry, really pin-sharp imagery, internal rhyme, repetitions. They're really building up their skill base by this point. And they created really moving portraits of Pershore as a submerged city, a kind of Atlantis, a lost Atlantis, and using those kind of sparkling details and a circling structure. So the poems closed where they'd opened, which seemed like a really poignant end to our project together. I'm just gonna try and run a video now of Ellie reading one of her poems, which I hope you'll be able to hear clearly.
Scotch of the mud, the crunch of the leaves, the sight of the calm water, the feel of the breeze in my hair, the smell of the water in the air, it calms me. The swimming swans, the delicate ducks, it makes me appreciate what's around me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ellie. I just want to talk briefly about care. I've talked about how the confidence of the students built over the time that we were working with them, but a really key concern of our workshops together was how we supported young people to manage their feelings and responses to climate change. They were really open actually about their feelings of fear, their feelings of hopelessness, their kind of rage and their anger and their worry. So we talked a lot about who they could talk to, whether that's pastoral care in school or what groups they could go to or groups that friends they could talk to within school. We tried to nurture a sense of agency in them by discussing ways in which they could take, micro mini actions in their own lives to address climate change. And we also talked about the role of the artist and the writer and how they have a role to play in amplifying issues. Telling stories about how things could be different, so visualizing new futures, the through-topia, beyond the climate emergency, and kind of using their voice and their platform to influence others. And one of the artists' work that we used to support this this piece was Christine Felch, who'd created something called an activist alphabet in response to the impacts of climate change. So she uses large scale screen printed letters with slogans to inspire action. So students made their own alphabet boards of text and visual images that personalise and to sort of highlight their own concerns and sort of give them that sense of agency. Back to you, Emma.
Thanks, Juliet. Okay, next slide, thank you. So one of the challenges throughout this project was how we worked cross curriculum between the art and English department in a secondary school, and the teachers rarely crossed paths. So the head of art, David Reed, who was fantastic and was involved throughout the whole project, decided that the best and easiest way from his perspective was to have Juliet work with the students first to produce their writing, and then for him to use the writing with the young people at the end as a starting point to then kind of like take it to another level, creating visual artwork. So how do you present this text? So he put together this fully immersive day that I joined him on to kind of look at how we could take the writing, the various different methods of whether it was one word, whether it was repeated words, whether it was full blown text, whether it was redaction, and create visual artworks based on that. So what you can see here is some collaged risograph that was then, the process was then used to kind of create cyanotypes, again looking at the use of water within the the art making process to kind of reflect the context of the writing and Pershore itself. And then the young people have been making slides using cut up transparencies of their risograph prints with this idea that we're going to create another intervention in Pershore somehow that's yet to happen. But that will take place soon. So just very quickly, because I think we are over time, Juliet, will you just take on to the next page, which is our physical outcomes of this project. So one of the things that Juliet has mentioned is the kind of the way the young people kind of like developed their voice through the processes that we used. But one of the things as Max Literacy project was for us to develop a toolkit or a kind of a guide that could be used. And for us, like I say, we don't have a collection, we don't have a building. And it was really important for us to look at creating a resource that could be used by anyone, parents, teachers, artists, gallery educators, in any context, anywhere. So this idea of using contemporary art in unusual places, but using the context as a starting point to explore the meaning behind the artworks and then how we can respond creatively. So we've created this toolkit, Understanding Art in Unusual Places, which can be downloaded from the Meadow Arts website and from the Max Literacy and Engage links that you will no doubt get soon, to create something which utilised all of the processes and techniques that Juliet used in the workshops with the young people, the activist alphabet, the power of 3 poems, using word repeat pictures, and creating the cyanotypes, sorry, pronounced that wrong. But I just want to say a big shout out to David Reed, the art teacher, who, as you can see on the left of this slide here, there's a kind of quite dense text and image, which is actually a 100-page PDF curriculum resource that he created on this entire project, using Hilary Jack's work as a starting point, using all of Juliet's activities and processes, and his own visual art techniques to effectively create a whole entire art curriculum using art and text and creative writing, which is just phenomenal. We don't know what we're going to do with that yet, but our very streamlined, generic Understanding Art in Unusual Places toolkit has been a really great outcome for us that we can use for any exhibition anywhere, which is so incredibly useful for us. I think one thing just before we finish, because I know we're over time, I'm really sorry guys, was just to say that my practice as a kind of creative producer or learning manager is very much about collaborative practice and about co-production. And one of the things that I started off this project at the beginning thinking that we could co-create the development of how this project might kind of unravel and kind of continue and grow. But actually that turned out to be really, really difficult, working with a secondary school and art teachers and English teachers cross department that don't necessarily work with each other, that work in a very structured way. And that was quite difficult to bring to life, actually, to kind of have this kind of like collaborative co-produced method. But I think what actually did happen was by having lots of different voices coming from very different arts approaches, we've actually come up with a really rich artwork and creative writing by the young people, and it is kind of demonstrated through these 2 excellent resources, if I do say so myself. Thanks, guys. There's our links if you want to find out more.
Thank you so much, Emma and Juliet, as well. And thank you also for bearing with us, everyone, for our slight technical teething problems that we had there. Nice to get that out of the way before the main gathering anyway. So we are running a little bit over, but I think it's okay. So I'd like to now invite Lisa back up and invite anyone that's got any questions to share them with us. So we've got Lisa, Peter and Sandra from Nottingham Contemporary, and Emma and Juliet online also. So does anybody have any questions? I'll just grab the roving mic.
Lisa, I thought it was fantastic hearing about your project. You mentioned that it had grown and kept on growing, and I'd just love to hear a little bit more about, you know, how what's going on and the legacy impact of the project.
Thank you. So when we put in for the funding, when we put in for the project, the Art of Belonging project was already complete, and we derived from that. But within the city, it's what's changing in the city. So we're working towards becoming, Nottingham is working towards becoming a city of sanctuary. And part of that is that the Cultural Educational Partner Challenge has now signed up to be a pledge to City of Sanctuary. And so therefore, all the cultural organisations within the city are now working together. And so this project is really fundamental to what's happening within the city and how we distribute that to all the other cultural venues, our learnings of what's been happening. So we've had more and more conversations that we ever thought we would, because people are interested to find out actually how does it work in practice? How do we engage asylum seekers and refugees within the culture sector, and how it contributes to them having that sense of belonging to the city. So when I say it's grown and grown, it literally has. The project is still there, but the conversations are bigger, and how we feed into that has actually grown. So the resource that we produce will be used by all those cultural organisations within the city. It will be shared through our CEP. And also we received extra money to produce further resources to highlight the resource. Thank you.
But thank you so much for joining us for this Fringe event. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear about these projects, many of which I know have been a real labour of love and taken quite a lot. And I hope that came across as well in the sharing. So could we say thanks again to our contributors? That's lovely. We've got a little bit of a break now before the main gathering commences. So I invite you to use that time and give yourself some time to digest or chat to colleagues. And then we'll be back here in the main room and in the main Zoom at 1 o'clock for our main gathering event. But thank you so much, and see you shortly.